Let's loom knit a rectangle corner to corner blanket. Grandma's rectangle blanket lets you make a simple corner to corner blanket as a rectangle. This double eyelet edge creates a beautiful border for the smooth stockinette center of this easy blanket pattern. And look, the stockinette is on a diagonal. It's so cool. I included two common sizes, a crib size for babies and a twin size for adults or children. You can easily make this pattern to accommodate any size rectangle. The pattern contains written instructions for those two sizes, and we will have videos for right and left-handed loom knitters. So join me right now and we are going to go over this together. Welcome to GoodKnit Kisses. We're all about helping you stitch your love and love your stitches. Well, believe it or not, this loom knit blanket starts as a corner to corner. You're actually starting right here and working in this direction here until you get your desired shortest width along here. That's why you can make this pattern in any yarn and you can change it out to any loom. So we're going to be working this middle section here that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. But what you do is you actually start working this corner, make your increases, get to the width that you want to cross here and the most amount of stitches that you're going to need, and then you continue and make this middle section, which is what this video will show you, because we already have the video for this beginning part, which is going to be our section 1. And then when you get to your desired length along the longest end here, you're going to start the decrease section, which makes the opposite triangle that goes on the other side. So we'll show you that on our little diagram here. But first, be sure and download your pattern. You can get that on our GoodKnit Kisses website for free and look at it on the blog, or you can download it from our Ravelry and Etsy stores if you want a ad-free pattern. So you're going to go get familiar with that, pull it up, and we will dive right into the pattern and go over it, and then we'll work the actual stitches together for this middle section. All right, grab your supplies and we'll see you soon. If you need a right or left-handed video tutorial, we will have the links down below as well. All right, so I've got my pattern ready, and just a note about materials and things. We do have the yarn noted and the loom. We've got a bulky 5-weight yarn and a loom that's a chunky or 5/8 large gauge loom. This is the Flexi loom, and I will say that if you want to make something with a thinner or smaller yarn, you can use the other two Flexi looms, either the regular gauge or the skinny. If you want to use a skinny, that's going to be a medium weight yarn. Either one of those are fine. And what's really nice about the Flexi looms is for this blanket, you can just keep adding links to it. So if you aren't as good about calculating and needing, knowing how much you need or figuring that out, or how many stitches you're going to need to increase to, then you can just keep getting more and more looms to add to it to get to the width that you want. That's going to be critical, and you'll see why here in a bit. But if you know that you're going to use a bulky weight yarn and you're going to use this particular loom, we have those stitch counts for you to increase to. Okay, moving on my next page, of course, we've got our abbreviations and gauge and all that, and the sizes, and then our notes. But the part I want to draw your attention to is this. So let's look at this diagram here. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in depth than what I talked about earlier. So you have 3 basic sections, 1, 2, and 3. The first section and the third section are in our grandma's square blanket. So we showed it as section 1 and 2. You have an increase section and then you have a decrease section. When you put those two together, you have a square, and that was the other pattern. And this one, what we do is we kind of crack that open and we stick in this part here. And that's what this video is addressing here. So basically what happens is you cast on and you increase to about 14 stitches, and then there's a 4-row repeat that allows you to continue going until you get to the length that you want, or the width that you want of your blanket along this short edge here. So the shortest width of your blanket, you're going to continue increasing and making that 4-row repeat until this length is what you want. And then your stitch count that's across this kind of imaginary line right here, this stitch count here is hanging on to your loom. So you're just going back and forth, and then your loom's about right here, okay? And then that stitch number is going to remain the same, and you start this middle section, which is what this video is going to do. So this is just a simple 4-row repeat to allow you to make this shape here. And then when you have the length that you want of your blanket from the very top of where your loom is, right here, all the way to this cast on corner, then you start the third section, and that's the decrease part. And then you work back and forth until you bind off, which is at the very end here, and you'll have like 4 stitches remaining. So that makes that whole blanket a rectangle, and that's why your stitches look like they're a diagonal. They're going this way instead of running this way or running this way. Does that make sense? That's why these stitches here are at an angle. Okay, so then you would just, if you need instructions on how to do this, you would go look at our other video, and we'll have a link down below. You'll do section 1 here, come back to this video, and then you're going to work on the middle section in this video, and then you'll go look at the third section according to the pattern here, but it's actually the second part of our square video, and work on the decrease part. All right, I hope that makes sense, and be sure and consult your pattern for more details. Let's jump over to the pattern just to kind of reiterate, and you'll also see this custom size part, and the tutorial videos will link you directly to section 1 and 3 from Grandma's Eyelet blanket, which is that square blanket. Those are the links, and then you'll have links back to this video here, which will be up as soon as we're done making it. All right, so here is our pattern. We just talked about that. We're casting on 4 stitches. We increase until we have 14 stitches. Then we have the section 1 increases. Then we move on to section 2, which is what this video is. We're knitting on the bias diagonally. So we're working this 4-row repeat, and then we're going to do section 3, and you'll go back to the other video to see how to do that. All right, so section 2, what we're going to do is we're going to be starting on row 16, and then we're going to be knitting 2, yarning over, knitting 2, yarning over. So we're increasing these 2 stitches here, and then we've got a decrease, and then we knit to the end of the row. So we actually only end up adding 1 stitch on this row. The next row we're going to change it, and we're backing down again, and then the next row we go back up again, and then the next row we go back down again. And so it basically just keeps our stitch count the same, and it just kind of starts creeping along the loom and moving along. Now, if you are a right-handed knitter, your diagram is going to look correct to you, and everything's going to kind of creep along to the right. If you're a left-handed knitter, it's going to look the opposite to you. So when you look at this diagram, it might flip, you know, so it'll look a little different to you, but just keep following the pattern and it will work out. And then you'll just keep repeating that until you get to the length that you need, and along the measurement there, and then you'll do the decrease section and consult your pattern for the link to go back to that. All right, so let's look at our sample. All right, so you're going to dive in and go ahead and work. This is where my cast on is. Look, there's my little cast on tail here. Work, get it to your 14 stitches, and then continue your 4-row repeat until you get to this area here. This is the corner, and then this is the end here. And the reason why it's a corner is because we actually go ahead and measure our shortest width, and then we decide, okay, we're ready. And we have our stitch count. And you might want to mark to the side, this is how many stitches I have, just so you maintain the same stitch count. All right, so I went ahead and marked them with stitch markers here just to show you. And then this is where you'll be when you want to start this video on your knitting for doing the tutorial and demonstration purposes. I went ahead and knit it for a while just so you can see what it's going to look like, okay? So you're going to do your 4-row repeat, working back and forth, and it will continue along, and then you will actually work until you get to this length. We'll talk about that after I show you that 4-row repeat again, but I just wanted you to see what that looks like. So go ahead and make your beginning part of your blanket, pause your video, and come back here when you're ready to work your middle section, 4-row repeat, row 16. So we are on section 2, the middle section, and we're going to begin by increasing this row, and it's going to shift over. Now, go ahead and make sure that you have an extra link in here so that you can start shifting items over. If you have no spaces in here, you're going to have to be overlapping stitches, and it's just not going to work very well. So I suggest adding in an extra link or two. All right, so we're going to start by knitting 2 stitches and go ahead and move them over as we go. So we're going to knit 1 and move it, and 2, move it, and then we're going to yarn over, just put the yarn in front of the peg and knit the next stitch, knit 1 and knit 2. And then we're going to yarn over, and then we're going to knit 2 together. So you can actually go ahead and knit 2 together, put them together, and then we'll make our yarn over. So we're going to move our knit 2 over first to accommodate for our yarn over, because we've got a knit 2, yarn over, knit 2, yarn over. So all we've done is we've just put this stitch on top, and now put our yarn in front of the peg for a yarn over, and then now knit these 2 stitches together. And that's it. So you're just going to knit to the end of the row for row 16, and pause your video, and I'll meet you back up at the end of that row for row 17. See you soon. Ready for row 17. And it's going to begin with a purl 1. So just purl that first stitch, take it off and put it on, and we're ready for the next one, which is a purl 2 together. So we're going to skip this stitch here, go into the next one and move it on to our previous stitch. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and purl these 2 stitches together. Okay, so we take off all the old and put on the new. And now we have an empty peg, and we're going to yarn over. So we're just going to simply put the yarn across for our yarn over. Then the next stitch, we're going to purl 1. Okay, and whoops, let's see, drop that one. Here we go. All right, so now we want to purl 2 together and yarn over. So we're going to take this next stitch, we're skipping one, going to the previous, or the next one, move it back to the previous, and we're going to purl these 2 stitches together and yarn over again. So far we haven't had to do any shifting of stitches just yet. We have our yarn over here, and now our next stitch is going to be purl 1, just as before. Okay. Now we have a purl 2 together, but we have no more yarn overs that we need to make. So far we've decreased a stitch and increased, decrease a stitch and increase, and now we just need to decrease, and we're not going to increase at all. So our stitch count is going to change. So go ahead and move your stitch over to purl 2 together, just as you did before. So we're skipping this one, we're taking the next one and moving it onto the previous, just like that. Oops. There we go. Okay, purling 2 together. Okay. So here now you've got these stitches done. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the rest of them are going to be knit. You're going to knit till the last 6 stitches, and you're going to purl those, and that's going to mirror the border on each side. So you can do one of 2 things here. You can either start to knit these stitches and move them back 1 stitch all the way, or you can go ahead and move these stitches over to the right to accommodate it. And so this whole thing is going to continue to shift along. So it's up to you. To make things easier, I'm just going to show you picking these stitches up and moving them back 1 stitch. Okay. And if you didn't do this, well, then what you would do is knit the stitch, and then you would pick it up and move it back 1 stitch every time. So if you do that, if you move them back, then what will happen is your stitches can get a little inconsistent, and it'd be easier to move these border stitches now, okay? And and they won't show a tension difference. Like they won't show the tension or tightness of your stitches as much as this middle section here. So if you keep all these where they are, then you won't have a problem. So I've just shifted those 8, and now we're just going to continue knitting until we have 6 stitches remaining. So go ahead and work all of that row until the last 6, and then you're going to purl these last 6 stitches. Pause your video and I'll meet you back at the end of row 17. See you soon. All right, so row 18 is going to be the simplest one. We're simply going to start by knitting 1, and then we're going to increase. So I want to move this outside stitch out 1 more stitch. Okay, now this next stitch, we're going to skip this empty one. We're going to go to the next stitch and put our yarn up top, and we're going to make a true knit stitch. And this is the beginning of a KFB, or knit front back. It's a type of increase. So we're going to go underneath this stitch on the bottom, pull downward to make a loop, and you're going to place this new loop on top of that skipped peg. Go ahead and tighten up your yarn like that. And now we're just going to E-wrap this stitch here. So we're going to go around the back and knit it off. Now, if you decided to just knit this here, what happens is this whole thing comes off, and then you have this big long loop here, and that's just not going to work. So that's why we have to E-wrap this stitch, or knit through the back loop is really what that's called. It's also a twisted knit stitch. All right, so just loop that over, and now you're ready to continue on your row, which is all knit stitches. So of course we are U-wrap knitting these stitches, and you could do a true knit stitch on all these if you wanted to. I really wouldn't do a flat knit on these. Okay, I know I didn't talk about that in the beginning, but I figured if you were watching the other video, you would have already caught on to that. So continue knitting all of your stitches all the way across. Pause your video, and I'll meet you for the 4th row of our repeat, which is row 19. See you there. All right, so row 19, we're going to start with a purl 1. So purl 1 stitch, and now we want to purl 2 together. And this is the 1 decrease that we're doing on this row. So we're going to skip a stitch, move the next stitch onto the previous stitch, purl those 2 stitches together. And you can actually pick this up and move it onto our empty peg over here, because we are moving down kind of like we did on 2 rows before from this side. So now go ahead and pick up that last stitch and place it. So we've sort of walked over our stitches, and we're ready to continue our row, which is purl 4 more stitches. So we got 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that completes our 6 stitches for our border of our row. And then now we're going to continue by knitting all the stockinette stitches in the middle, and you're going to work until you get to the last remaining 6 stitches, and you're going to purl those stitches. So you're simply knitting the middle and then purling the last 4 stitches, and that will finish out row 19 of your 4-row repeat. So you're just going to continue repeating those 4 until you have the measured length from this end here all the way down to your corner, to that's the total desired length that you want. And if you need to take off these stitches here, like maybe several stitches on some scrap yarn, and take it off of the loom, and then get it to kind of ease up the tension so that you can accurately measure that, then you might want to try doing that. That's once you get all of your length in. So I'll go ahead and repeat this on video so that you can see these 4 rows without the extra explanation. So go ahead and pause your video, come back, and when we come back, I'm going to work rows 16, 17, 18, and 19 without the extra information. And that way you'll have them one after another. There'll also be timestamps down below if you want to jump to those spots. All right, we'll see you soon. All right, row 16 of our middle section, we are going to knit 2, and we'll move those stitches to the outside as soon as we make them. So I've got knit 1 and then knit 2 and move it over. And now we want to yarn over in front of the peg and then work our next 2 knit stitches. Knit 1 and knit 2. And then we want to yarn over, but we need to move the stitch for the knit 2 together. So pick this next stitch up and move it on to the one after. And now we can yarn over in front of the peg and knit 2 together. So we have our knit 2, yarn over, knit 2, yarn over, knit 2 together. And now we're going to knit to the end of the row. Pause your video and meet me back at the end of the row for row 17. See you there. Row 17, we're going to work the first 8 stitches and then move them down, and then we'll have stocking knit. So we're first going to start by purling 1. So put your yarn below, purl 1, and then we want to purl 2 together. So skip the stitch, take the next one, move it on the previous, and purl 2 together. And then we're going to yarn over, so yarn in front of the peg and purl 1 and repeat that. Skip the stitch, go to the next one, pick it up, place it, purl these 2 stitches together, and yarn over. And then we're going to purl 1 and purl the next 2 stitches together, pick that stitch up and move it to the previous, purl together. Okay, and now this is where we're going to move our stitches over. So we have 1 stitch moved, 2, move our yarn over, that's 3, 4, 5, 6, this is a yarn over, 7, and 8. And those are our border stitches, and now we're simply going to knit until 6 stitches remain. So knitting all of these, work until 6 stitches remain, and you're going to purl those last 6 stitches. Pause your video. I will meet you for the next row, row 18. See you there. All right, row 18, we're going to knit 1 stitch and move it 1 stitch to the outside. And now we're going to knit front back to increase. So we're going to skip this stitch, place our yarn above our next stitch, and go underneath the first stitch, pull down to make a new loop, place it on our empty peg and tighten it with the working yarn, and then E-wrap this 3rd stitch right here and simply knit the rest of your row. That's it. Continue working your row, pause the video, and meet me back at the end for row 19 of our 4-row repeat. See you there. Row 19, start by purling 1. And now we want to purl 2 together. Skip the stitch, move to the next one, move it back to the previous, and purl the 2 stitches together. Go ahead and move that stitch over. And move the last stitch over. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that up. And now we're going to purl the next 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, And now you're going to knit, stocking knit until the last 6 stitches. So continue knitting all the way across until you get to the last 6 stitches, and you're going to purl those, and that will wrap up our 4-row repeat of rows 16 through 19. So if you are looking at your pattern, you're going to work that until your long edge measures 60 inches or 90 inches for those 2 lengths that we talked about, those 2 sizes, crib and twin, or until your desired length ending after this row 19. And then you'll move on to section 3, which is decreases. And if you're looking at Grandma's eyelet blanket, which is the square, it's going to say section 2, or it'll say decreases area, but and you see the video for that part, but this section 3 will be exactly that same decrease area. Your numbers will be off a little bit from what I say in the video, but the actual rows match. So you're just going to use that instructional video to continue that out. So I'm about to show you our finished sample here. So we worked our first section with that first corner, and it stops here. And as we worked, I actually made about 12 repeats on mine. So you can see my kind of straight knitting. I'm going from here to here and from here to here because I measured my length that I wanted from this corner to this corner. All right, so I got that part. And then I started on my decrease. So I went ahead and marked up here with this purple stitch marker and over here with this purple stitch marker, and you can see where my decreases started for my 3rd section of the pattern, and it goes all the way to the end to the last 4 stitches. And then you're done, and then you weave in your tails. My tails aren't woven in, but I just wanted you to see it this way with the stitch markers on here. So this is just for visual purposes. It does have a slight angle to it. I'm holding this straight on here, and this part does have a little bit of an angle to it, and this part kind of has a little bit of an angle too. They're not really severe. It looks a little different on the camera just because of how my camera is tilted, but it's definitely a rectangle. But when you make the larger size for the baby crib blanket or the twin size adult blanket, it's not going to be as noticeable because it's just on a larger scale. This one just looks different because it's just super small. You wouldn't really want to make it this size. So anyway, I hope that has helped you. I look forward to seeing your blankets. Be sure and tag me at GoodKnit Kisses on Instagram. I'd love to see yours. Please comment down below, and we'll talk to you soon. Happy knitting, everyone. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us today, where we help you stitch your love and love your stitches. See you again soon.